And there goes Baby Yoda. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking the brand new Christopher Nolan movie, that is Tenet. I need you in the comments down below. If you have seen this film, did you enjoy it? Are you looking forward to it this weekend in the United States? And if you like these reviews, be sure to let me know. Hit that thumbs up button. But let's talk about this movie real quick. So armed with only one word, Tenet, and fighting for the survival of the entire world, a protagonist journeys through a twilight world of international espionage on a mission that will unfold in something beyond real time. My goodness, where to begin? I do want to start here. I am obviously a massive fan of Christopher Nolan, and my expectations for a while, they were maybe even a bit too lofty. I started to hear some things creep in as I was going in to see this movie, so maybe my expectations were lowered just a tad bit, but I think the overall consensus is that there's a lot of enjoyment to be had with this movie. And looking at it on a cinematic, technical perspective, what they're able to do with some of these action scenes, and obviously you've seen the trailer, going forwards, going backwards, kind of integrating that and playing it out on screen, on the big screen. Folks, I encourage you, seek out the biggest and best screen you can find. Get one with great surround sound, because the score for this film, Ludwig Göransson, who did Black Panther and The Mandalorian, I thought crushed it. And you go into it, you're like, oh, Hans Zimmer's not scoring this movie? Uh-oh, that's not going to be good. But he does a great job. Now, I've also been hearing some things about the actual sound design when you're talking about how sometimes the music can overpower the dialogue. And I did notice maybe a couple of moments where I was trying to pay attention to what's going on, and because of how overwhelming the score was, I could see that criticism. But when it comes to our characters, to say wearing a mask or being in a situation where the background noise, the ambience kind of overwhelms the dialogue, to me, even though maybe I wanted to hear that dialogue a bit more crisp and clear, it honestly felt kind of realistic. I've had to wear masks like that before. I used to work for the government for a year and a half, and when someone I'm talking to is wearing that kind of mask, I have no clue what they're saying. So I actually found that and a couple of those moments throughout to be a bit more realistic, and that's what Nolan does so well, is he captures that realism in a situation that maybe escapes reality in a sense, especially in a movie like this where we're dealing with time inversion, which is what they call it in the trailer, but it gets much deeper and much more grand scale than that. And the scale of this movie is epic. And I'll tell you this, maybe it's where I've not been at theater in quite so long, but that first scene, that's just the opening scene with the score and just seeing all of this play out, this huge, epic, grand action scene. I was so happy to be back in a theater, and you feel those Christopher Nolan vibes. It is epic beyond belief. I can't tell you how many times I had chills in this film just because of the way that they're edited together and the way that Nolan goes about his filmmaking. It's so beautiful. The color correction, the look, that crisp look he brings to all of his films, and some of the color correction, red and blue. That's all I'll say, but there's one scene in particular that I thought was just magnificent to look at. But the first 20-25 minutes for me, after that opening action scene, it did kind of highlight through a few things and slow down to a point where I sat back and said, you know what? Maybe it's just I've not felt that that Nolan moment that inevitably comes with all of his films, and I'm not locked in on the characters maybe as much as he wants me to be, right? You don't learn as much as you're anticipating about John David Washington's character, about Robert Pattinson's character. Even though they're fantastic in the movie, Pattinson, again, getting me more and more hyped for Batman, was so good. Elizabeth Debicki's character is really the only one that you have an emotional attachment to, and that's a lot different from a movie like Interstellar, McConaughey and his daughter, Inception, Leo and his wife. This time we have John David Washington, and his emotional attachment slowly progresses through the movie, and you find out what that is, but we don't start out with that, as we do in all of the other Nolan films. And you can even go into Batman with Rachel. So it was a bit of a switch up from the films that I'm going to compare Tenet to, and that is your Inception, Interstellar, even a Dark Knight. Something like Dunkirk, it's a very different kind of story, different kind of Nolan film, even though he takes what he learned from Dunkirk in implementing those war scenes, really brings that to you in Tenet. And you've probably seen the newest trailer where they show a few snippets of those grand scenes, and they're filmed oh so well, and it's so cool seeing this time inversion play out on screen, and then realizing what the movie is. We know this movie's called Tenet. We know it deals with time travel. Austin, what else is it about? Well, throughout the first half of the film, you don't necessarily know where it is leading, and there are a lot of unanswered questions. And I won't lie, I walked away from this film with many questions, but thrown in the butts, you hit a moment at the halfway point, maybe not even the halfway point of the movie, to where everything begins to click. Things start to make much more sense, and you slowly realize what this story actually is, how they are solving this problem, and who our villainous characters are, where they spawn from. That's when the movie started clicking for me. That's when I sat back and said, this is Christopher Nolan. Maybe I had to wait a bit longer than I have in other Nolan films. Not as much exposition in this movie as his other films. I find those to be necessary moments in a movie like Inception, but we don't get that in Tenet. We're just kind of off and running, not having a lot of time to establish, okay, can we get a clear idea of what the mission is, and then, 25, 30 minutes in, can we get a clear idea of what the mission is, Nolan? But then again, I question myself. I say, I want a movie that makes me think. I want a film that, A, keeps me on the edge of my seat, which Tenet did, B, keeps me thoroughly in awe and entertained, and finally, Nolan giving us his version of a James Bond film. Those were the vibes that I was getting all throughout this movie. I mean, this is what it's like seeing Nolan tackle this kind of espionage story in the vein of what Inception gave us, but it felt much more like a James Bond, without some of the tropes and things that make James Bond, and of course adding in this sci-fi fantastical element. But it was an extremely interesting way to start filling the movie from that perspective, and that's when Tenet really started to click for me, and I said, this is an extremely different kind of film from Chris Nolan. Obviously, the time trope, he's dealt with that in all of his movies, and also the simultaneous storylines happening at once, all building to that climactic moment. We've seen it in a handful of films. There are a couple of movies under his belt that maybe don't execute that quite as well, and even though I don't think Tenet is a perfect movie, that particular thing I was looking for in this film was executed quite well. There are three very distinct storylines all happening in the third act, all kind of building up to one climactic event, and all three felt as if they were on a trajectory to hit at the same point, if that makes sense. And even though a very convoluted script dealing with all of these time elements and a lot of questions that still have to be answered, and I'm sure I will get plenty of answers as I rewatch this film, which is exactly what I did with Interstellar. You look at the screenplay, that really stood out to me as excellent execution by Christopher Nolan, doing a great job, as always. Kenneth Branagh's character is good. He's a little over the top and eccentric at times. There's one scene in particular that I didn't love. I thought it was a bit too dramatic. And then a few moments within where things slow down so much that pacing just comes to a halt. And it didn't necessarily work for me. And those aren't moments we get often in Nolan films. I just think there's so much you're dealing with in a movie like Tenet. It is hard to refrain from giving us those moments to sit back and go, there's a lot happening on screen right now. And again, I haven't watched a review yet, but I've seen the tweets. Tenet is Nolan's worst movie. It's humorless. It's this, it's that. And again, I know there's a lot to soak in with the film, and I'm still slightly confused with a handful of elements, but it did start to make sense for me as the film progressed. And maybe it's just because I got the tone that I was looking for, that I was expecting going into Tenet, even though we are thrust into things and we don't get a ton of backstory for these characters. But with the movie like this, the backstory is the front story, and you're moving through different moments. We'll talk about it when I talk spoilers. So this one's tough. Obviously, you want to give every Nolan movie a 9 or a 10 out of 10, but you have to judge it accordingly. I can't quite get there with my score. There are a couple of things I need to be sure of going back and watching the film again, but that's what this movie is. Inside and out, it is a film that you have to watch multiple times to grasp what is happening. As it unravels, you are learning about these character moments earlier in the film, and you're saying to yourself, oh, that criticism I have from the first act is now resolved, or at least that's the way I was taking it in. It's not for everyone, for sure. I'd say it will be more of a divisive Nolan film, but I thoroughly enjoy this movie. I loved my theatrical experience, and it is that kind of movie. So as for my score, right now, I'm going an 84% for Tenet. We'll see how it holds up on my second watch, and we will definitely be talking spoilers again this week. Not just spoilers, I will probably be ranking my Christopher Nolan list, or keeping it the same, but just kind of inserting Tenet in there. I appreciate you guys so much for watching. Again, if you like these kinds of reviews, if you enjoyed this video, if you are going to watch Tenet this weekend, and if you're not, you're holding out, I completely understand, but I would love to know all of those things in the comments down below. Please refrain from spoilers. Save that for my next Tenet video. You guys the best. I'm going to keep an eye on Baby Yoda because he's doing a little time inversion back there. It's freaking me out.